The pandemic has posed as a double threat. Americans are dealing with a health crisis along with the economic fallout from COVID-19. This all happening with the November elections just 89 days away. Join us now is the president's newest advisor, Steve Cortes. Well known to many of you, he's also a member of Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Steve, great to have you here. We received better than expected weekly jobs report, no doubt about that. The report showing 1.1 million new unemployment claims filed, and that number is down from 1.4 million or so from the week before. Still, talk to me about what is the best argument for the president's reelection when we continue to lose so many jobs?
Right. Well, regarding the Wall Street data, and by the way, before I got into politics, I got into politics with Donald Trump. Before that, I spent 25 years in financial markets. So I am still a Wall Street guy by heart, and I pay a lot of attention to this data. And we're never going to celebrate having 1 million people apply for unemployment benefits. However, when we look at these numbers, it is the lowest number that we've seen yet, the lowest weekly number since the coronavirus lockdowns commenced. So we do take that as good news. We also know that we've added 7.5 million jobs over the last 2 months. Really looking forward to seeing what the jobs report tomorrow reveals. I would tell you this, though, in terms of the outlook going forward. The president has a track record of the first 3 years of his administration of building an amazing economy, and particularly for blue-collar workers, for working-class labor in the United States. It was the best economy in at least a generation and perhaps ever. So he has a solid track record that we can point to of producing the conditions for prosperity, again, particularly for wage earners in this country. Now, nobody could control, unfortunately, except for the Chinese Communist Party, what hit us. We were hit with an economic meteor because of the deception and malfeasance of the Chinese Communist Party, crashed the global economy, infected, unfortunately, the entire world. What we can control from here, though, is how we approach the recovery. And President Trump, who built the first Trump boom, I believe that people will recognize that he is the man, the entrepreneur-in-chief president who can create the Trump boom 2.0 through his continuing policies of regulatory relief, tax relief. I think there's going to be more tax relief coming, hopefully through the Congress, if not, perhaps by executive action. The president, if he has to, has indicated that he will act unilaterally. But I think that the people, when they go to the ballot box in November, will recognize that while the economy has been obviously walloped by this virus, we also know that there are green shoots, there are hopeful signs in recent data that the recovery, the great American comeback commences, and that President Trump is the commander-in-chief we need for that recovery to flourish.
To push you on your point about tax relief, you and I both know the power of the purse does not lie with the president, it lies with Congress. The president can issue an executive order, for instance, with regards to the payroll tax cut, but the president does not have the power to forgive taxes. He can simply delay them, so it's not entirely fair to suggest that the president can simply use the power of the pen to significantly move tax policy. Isn't that up to Congress?
Yeah, yes, look, it is clearly up to Congress, and we hope, although I'm not going to hold my breath, that Nancy Pelosi is going to be reasonable, unfortunately, on tax relief, at least in front of the election. So no, you're correct there. But again, what I'm saying is, if we can't get reasonable pro-growth legislation through the House of Representatives, it's still useful for the president to do whatever he can through executive order to, again, jumpstart this economy.
All right, so Steve, so you're a markets guy like me. Let's talk markets. I couldn't help but notice the president during that very lengthy marathon interview with Fox News yesterday. One line he said stood out to me as it pertains to investor sentiment. He said, Joe will drive the market into a depression. I know there's a lot of people out there that say, okay, if you remove a Republican from the White House, you remove the House or the Republican majority from the Senate, perhaps you're talking about tax policy that's not so favorable to investor sentiment. But you do have those here in Wall Street in New York, and right now I'm in Lower Manhattan, and they say maybe a Joe Biden win, a Democratic win, would not be such a bad thing for a market. A Bank of America Global Research report recently said the market impact of a sweeping Democratic victory could be positive. It could likely include things like a steadier coronavirus response, more open approach to global trade. What is the campaign's best evidence that a Democratic win would be uniquely bad for the markets?
Right. Well, listen, you bring up a good point, and I would concede that if Joe Biden were sort of a traditional Democrat, if he were, say, in the Bill Clinton mold, that perhaps that analysis would be spot on. But here's what I would point out to Bank of America or to anybody who's trying to make this argument. This is not your parents' or your grandparents' Democratic Party. This party has been hijacked by the most radical elements of American politics, and that's not just my opinion. If you read it, they actually put it on paper, which, to be honest, shocked me. If you look at the so-called Unity Task Force document that Joe Biden wrote along along with Bernie Sanders, with input from members of the squad, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And if you read the economic components of their agenda, this is an incredibly radical takeover of the American economy, including, for example, basically crushing the American energy industry. All of us know that the last American recovery out of 2008 and 09, out of the credit crisis, it was American energy that powered that recovery. For a period of time in the early years, literally every net new job in America was created by the energy industry. So it can lead us again in this current recovery out of the cataclysm again that the virus thrust upon the world. But if we elect Joe Biden, he has promised, he's pledged to us that he is going to crush American industry, the American energy industry, and I think that will have catastrophic effects on financial markets as well.
While we have you, let's talk Ohio, since that's where the president's going to be today. You recently wrote an op-ed for Cleveland.com. You make the case Donald Trump is better for Ohio than Biden. Yet, Steve, you and I both know we are seeing troubling polls for the incumbent president. They do show Joe Biden with a lead in the Buckeye State, especially given the news of the day today. Why is Donald Trump faltering in those polls in Ohio, a place that you say he's done nothing but deliver for? And what does the campaign need to do to better change the tide there?
Right. Well, first I would say this regarding polls, a couple of things. One is that only one poll really matters, and that's on November 3rd, where I believe we will prevail. I will also tell you, as somebody who was in this same position working for the campaign 4 years ago in 2016, I heard a lot of this very similar, even almost to the date 4 years ago, a lot of this kind of dire talk. And of course, we surprised the world and pulled off perhaps the greatest political upset in American history. I think we're going to do that again. When I look at battleground state polls, Ohio being one of them, what I see generally is that this is an absolute cage match, and I believe it will be into the final bell of this race. We are within the margin of error in almost all of the public polls in these battleground states. So I'm not trying to be Pollyanna and say that everything is fine. No, I think it's going to be an absolute battle. And that's understandable given what has happened in the country. Now, I don't think any reasonable person blames Donald Trump, but nonetheless, our country is in crisis. And because of that, there's understandable anxiety in the country. And it is difficult for an incumbent to run in a time like that. However, again,
Sure.
I really am confident that when the people look at what Donald Trump built the first 3 years of his presidency economically, the people of Ohio and other key states are going to say he can build it. He did it once. He can do it again.
Can do it again. That's what you and your campaign say. Cage match for sure. Steve Cortes, I've wanted to do this interview for a long time, but let's keep it going, especially on the investor sentiment stuff. You're welcome back anytime. Steve Cortes with the Trump campaign.